Next, you're gonna have to rinse the burette 3 times with sodium hydroxide. You will want to get a small piece of lap tape, put it on your 250 ml beaker, and label it NaOH. You're gonna need a small funnel, which you're gonna put on top of the burette, and a disposable transfer pipette, a plastic disposable transfer pipette. When you're using the transfer pipettes, you need to keep track of what you're using them for so that you don't cross-contaminate your reagents. It is a really smart idea to label the transfer pipettes with your Sharpie. So on this transfer pipette, I'm gonna write NaOH. And I'm actually going to put the transfer pipette on the beaker that I'm using to hold the NaOH that I'm going to use to rinse the burette. Basically, we're doing the same thing we did when we rinse with water, but using NaOH, and we are not using a square bottle. In this case, we're using a beaker and a funnel. So just put a small volume of the NaOH in the burette. That was a little bit too much. And then let it flow till it gets close to the valve. Remember, we had a little bit of water in there, and that is okay. That is exactly what you want, because you don't want the valve to dry. Otherwise, you'll get stuck with air bubbles on the tip. Once the liquid gets close to the valve, just watch it carefully and then stamp it before it reaches the valve. We just repeat that 2 more times. Rinse number 2. Open the valve. Watch the liquid go down. Stop before it reaches the valve. Rinse number 3. Add NaOH. Open the valve. And stop before it reaches the valve. I am looking at the tip to make sure that I don't see any air bubbles. If you do see bubbles, sometimes it helps to tap the tip with your finger like this to encourage the air bubbles to come out of the tip. The next step is to add sodium hydroxide all the way to the 0 mark. Basically, we're filling the burette with 50 ml of sodium hydroxide. Again, use the beaker with the NaOH and start adding sodium hydroxide carefully. Stop before you get to the 0 mark, and then use the transfer pipette to carefully adjust the liquid to the mark, drop by drop. You want the meniscus, you want the base of the meniscus to be on top of the line. If you make a mistake and you add too much, you can use the transfer pipette to readjust it. Okay. Now I'm on the mark. Now you're ready to start your titration. I'm going to assume that you prepare your sample and that the sample is already on the 125 ml Erlenmeyer flask. For this step, you're going to need the 1% bromophenol blue indicator, and you're going to use another disposable transfer pipette. Again, I'm going to label these with the words indicator. I suggest that once you open the indicator, you put the transfer pipette that you're going to be using for the indicator in the tube and keep it there till the end of the lab. That way it's less likely that you will make a mistake and use the wrong pipette for the wrong reagent. As you can see, I still have the one I was using for sodium hydroxide on the NaOH beaker, and I plan to keep this one on the indicator. Add 3 to 4 drops into the solution in the Erlenmeyer flask. This is called swirling. You swirl to mix. And now you're ready to titrate this solution with the NaOH that you put in the buret. When you're titrating, put the Erlenmeyer flask underneath the buret. Open the valve just enough to get a drop-by-drop flow, and swirl to mix the drops as they fall into the solution that you're titrating. You're going to be looking for a color change, and when that happens, you're going to stop the flow of the buret. You need to record the volume of NaOH that you use to titrate the solution. To do this, you're going to be using the markings on the wall of the buret. From 0 to 1 is 1 ml, from 1 to 2 is another 1 ml, from 2 to 3 is another 1 ml, and then you need to learn how to read the subdivisions. There are 10 marks for each mil, and that means that each subdivision is 0.1 mils. So right here, we know that we use 3, and then 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and 0.5 mils of NaOH. So the total volume will be 3.5 mils of NaOH used for the titration. To keep things simple, I'm just going to ask you to fill the buret back to the 0 mark each time you finish a titration. Do the same thing we did before. Use the funnel, your beaker with NaOH, and add NaOH back to the 0 mark. If you go over, take the funnel out and use the transfer pipette to adjust the meniscus to the 0 mark. At the end of the lab, drain the buret completely to your waste beaker. You want to actually get as much of the NaOH out as you can, and then just leave the valve open at this point and rinse 3 times with the ionized water. try to use the small volumes of water and reagent when you're doing rinses, because we're gonna put everything into our waste container and we have limited space. Rinse number 2. And rinse number 3.